So there we are, we have one of the Birmingham boys, and this is the first male lion I've seen in months, so I'm super excited. I'm not 100% sure which one it is. It looks like it could be Tinyo, but I might be wrong. We'll have to rely on all of you at home. Remember, #SafariLive with the animal that you think it is. I think it is Tinyo, but it's difficult to say at the moment. All we've got is an ear and a mane, so it could, I might be wrong completely. The grass is very long, and I'm hoping as the sun comes up a little bit, it's going to start hitting him, and that might prompt him to move closer towards the airstrip and not just to go flat in this long grass, because if he decides to lie down in this long grass, it's going to be very difficult to actually see him. But it's hard to ID this Birmingham from this angle, so hopefully you can see the sun is just behind him there, and I'm hoping as it kind of comes past, he might then decide to move. If he doesn't, what I might do is just go around a little bit. It seems like it's a little bit more open from the other side there, and I might be able to get a better view of him. But this is so good. I'm quite glad that we found him. And the other interesting thing is that there is tracks for all of the sticks and their little cubs around this area as well. So I'm hoping that he might start calling at some stage, and maybe the others respond, and we'll be able to find the little sticks cubs. They're so cute, and I haven't seen them in the last 3 weeks, so I'm sure they've already gotten much bigger, but it would be great to find all of those little cubs again and have a look at them. So we'll definitely be listening and looking out. And you can see he's busy grooming himself, and I'm sure that's because he's been walking around quite a bit, and he would have picked up quite a bit of dew in this wet grass. So it's just to get that coat nice and clean again. Also any parasites that he might have picked up. And at this time of the year, there's quite a few sort of burrs and types of seeds that stick to you. And much like James was talking about yesterday evening about seeds sticking to your socks, it's the same thing for a lion. He ends up getting a whole bunch of things sticking all over him, and so that's why they go through this grooming process before they decide to lie down and sleep for the day. But I'm hoping that the sun is going to start now. What's interesting is that we didn't hear him calling much this morning. He did call probably, I would say, at about 5:30, so an hour before we got going. But other than that, he's been quite quiet, which is strange. So ladybugs and daisies, you say it looks like Tinyo. Well, I agree with you. I think it looks like him, but it's very difficult to say for 100% sure. We'll have to wait until he pops his head up again, and then we can actually get a better view. I will tell you one thing though, is that what is quite amazing is I haven't seen much of the Birminghams in the last probably 2-3 months. We've had sort of sporadic sightings of them, but I can't believe how dark his mane has gotten. It's gotten very ginger, and there's this black streaks running through it. So it's really, they do look a lot darker than what they're used to, and they're starting to become quite formidable in the sort of size, and the manes are getting much thicker. So it really is very good to see them again. Now I'm hoping that the rest will be around. It's been interesting to see the sort of movement of the Birminghams. Seems to be 3 that are hanging around together, and they've been around Simambili and have been moving quite a bit, and then there's always one that seems to be off on its own. Probably to find that's because they're trying to balance their time between the Inkahumas and the sticks, and so you keep finding one will come down this way and the other one goes back to where the Inkahumas are, and they just keep trading with each other. Because I know the other day when they had all 3 of them, Tinyo was part of it, and it was in Suko or Neno, one of those 2 that was missing from the 3. So it just seems that they're taking turns coming down to where the sticks are. Now you can see the light is just starting to hit the top of his mane, so I wonder if he's not going to start waking up now and moving. And I wonder if we can just go close in on his mane and see if there's any dew on it. Sometimes you get these little golden droplets of dew on there, just on the top. Hopefully he puts his head up like he did just now, and it will almost look like he's got these little sort of white spots all over him. But whatever he's doing it with a bit of relish. He seems to be grooming quite confidently. So Wesley, you're wondering what he's doing. Well, he's grooming. He's licking with his tongue. Now his tongue has got these little hooks on it that are able to basically pull off all these little parasites that he might have picked up, or the grass seeds that I was talking about just now. So he's cleaning himself effectively and getting himself prepped for a day of rest. Remember, the lions are now starting to come to the end of their sort of active period. They normally active around sunset, sunrise, and a little bit into the evening, and so they're a lot more crepuscular than we think. And you'll find now that he's just starting to groom so that he can then begin to rest for the day. So there we go, you can see his tongue's out, just grooming his paws now. And it is quite difficult to see through all this long grass, but there we go. So, Kitty Cat, you're wondering if lions and leopards tend to stay out of each other's way. Well, leopards more so than lions. Lions will actively confront a leopard because they know they're much bigger and more powerful, and they have the dominance over a leopard, so they'll assert that dominance. Whereas leopards with lions, leopards know that a lion is bigger and therefore a major threat, and so leopards will try and move away from lions. And often when you hear lions calling, you'll find leopards moving in the opposite direction, away from there. It's not to say that it doesn't happen where there is interaction between the two, and luckily for leopards, they are able to climb, so they can get into the sort of high branches of trees and try and get away from lions in that regard. They also tend to be a little bit more agile than these big cumbersome males, but it's not to say that leopards don't get caught out every now and then. There was a leopard in this area called Wabayiza, who was a son for Tundi, and he was unfortunately caught by the sticks and actually eaten by them. So it does happen from time to time. Now I'm going to try and just reposition a little bit, because where we are is very difficult. All you can see is the back of his head. So I want to just try and see if I can't get around a little bit, because really, otherwise we're going to have a tough time of actually seeing him. There's also another vehicle that's going to come in, so I'm going to just try and see if I can't make space for them so that they can also see. So there we go, that will be a bit better for them as well. Now the problem is where we are is this black monkey orange. Now it's this hard woody plant, and it sounds terrible when you drive over it, but unfortunately it has to be done. Now, while we try and reposition and get ourselves into a better spot, let's go back to Jamie and see where she is and how she's faring on her search. Indeed, James, the Birmingham's doing what the Birminghams do best whenever I'm with them, and that is absolutely sleep as fast as they can. It seems to be a trait that I have with them. I'm yet to see the Birminghams in any sort of interesting situation whatsoever. I've seen them many times and I've heard them roar a few times, but other than that, 99% of the time that I've spent with the Birminghams has been exactly like this, flat sleeping and really not up to too much. So I was hoping we would get him moving around as the sun hit him, but it seems that he's decided it's been all too long a night and it's now time to have a nice rest, which is not ideal for us because it's quite sort of obscured by long grass and bits of sort of vegetation everywhere, and I was really hoping that he was going to go out onto the airstrip because this morning light is so pretty. It would have been fantastic to see him kind of moving out into the light, but as we were talking about earlier, his grooming behavior was indicative of him starting to kind of wind down and rest for the morning, so I suppose we can't be too surprised. And I'm sure this evening he's going to be a little bit more active, and so we'll try to come back this evening and see if he's not going to be moving around just around sunset. That's normally when they do start to get up, so we'll just have to be a bit patient. And I'm sure we will get an amazing sighting of the Birminghams at some point, or like I say, I will. I know that James and Jamie and Taylor and Brent have all had crazy sightings with the Birminghams, of them hunting and them with the inkahumas and cubs, especially in that drought period. But I've just seemed to never have had very much luck with them, which I suppose is okay. In fact, actually I lie. I've had one crazy sighting with the Birminghams, which was when they were still young and they weren't territorial yet. It was when the Matimbas were around and the Majingalans were around, and they came all the way up to Simbambili, the 5 of them, when it was when there were still 5 Birminghams. And we were staying, well, obviously I was working at Simbambili at the time, and it was late in the evening. It was maybe about 11 o'clock at night. And we had some guys that had come to do thatching, and so when they came and did the thatching, because there was a whole bunch of extra staff doing thatching work, some of them were staying in tents, and it was the first time they'd ever been in the bush, a lot of them, and so they ended up putting up their tents, and they had a few beers too many, and they then went to sleep. And about 11, 12 o'clock at night, we heard this massive commotion, and all of a sudden there was male lions roaring all over the place, and it ended up that the Majingalans and the Birminghams had a huge confrontation together. So it was 5 male lions from the Birminghams, 4 from the Majingalans, and they were chasing each other all around the camp, and they ended up chasing each other into the camp and right past these tents, roaring loudly. And when I woke up in the morning, we were watching with torches, and when I woke up in the morning, all these guys that had come to do the thatch and that were in their tents had vanished. They had decided that no, these were spirits that were coming to warn them that this was not a good place to be, and they literally packed their tents up and were gone before the sun had even risen. So it was quite comical in hindsight that these guys were so scared of the lions that they ended up moving on. But it was quite an amazing sound experience just for having that many male lions, 9 male lions roaring at one another and chasing each other around the camp. It was pretty incredible to watch. And that's why the Birminghams then shifted so far east for so long. It's because the Majingalans pushed them out. They then chased the Matimbas away and ended up settling more in this eastern section. And that's sort of the story of that. And it was quite an amazing sort of sighting to witness. So, Laurie, you're wondering what the name and ages of the Birmingham boys is. In terms of the ages, we don't have a definitive age. It's a little bit difficult. I know some people say that they've sort of guessed that their ages and that they were part of a pride that comes from north of us, and that there's a lot of speculation as to actually which cubs they were within that pride. But we think that they must be now approaching sort of 7 years old, about 6.5, 7, and the names of them is Tinyo, which is this male that we see lying flat, or can hardly see, should I say. And then you've got Mfumo, which is a male that's got lots of scars all over his face. He's got a big sort of gash under his right eye, and he had a big wound in his nose, and it looks like the sort of most beaten up of the 4. And then we have Nena and Insuku, which are the 2 prettier boys of the group. So really, that's the 4 of them. And then we used to have a 5th one that was around, but unfortunately he died from what we think was a buffalo horn to his chest and into his lung, and he ended up dying from that. And he didn't really have a set name. There was a few names thrown around about him, so he was called Scrapper or Tokolosh, and unfortunately he is no longer here. So the 4 of them are Nena, Nsuku, Mfumo and Tinyo, and those are them. It would be really nice to see all 4 together again. I don't actually think I've seen all 4 together in over a year. I know that they have every now and then they join together, but it seems with the Birmingham Coalition is that they spend a lot of time apart, which is interesting because with the Majingalans and the Matimbas and all these others that I've seen in my time, generally they spend a lot of time together, and the very successful coalition that the Majingalans have been is probably the key to their success, is that they've spent a lot of time together, and whenever there is any threat, you find all 4 of those Majingalans were together and they were confronting the threat. It was quite amazing to see. You'd find that they'd be split for a few days, and as soon as another male lion roared anywhere near them, they all 4 were together and they were warding off that threat, and that's probably why they ended up being so successful. And even now to this day, the 3 of them are always together. The 4th one unfortunately died at the beginning of the year, and so we now have just the 3 Majingalans left, but they still move as a unit, and they are still kind of the dominant males in the western part of the Sabi Sands, and even as much as up into the northern part here, since the disappearance of the Matimbas into Manyeleti. I believe somebody the other day saw one of the Matimbas in Londolozi back in that area, so it'll be interesting to see where the other one is. But in terms of sort of male lion coalitions, the Majingalans are still really the kings of that central and western part of the Sabi Sands. But you can see he's now fast asleep. Even though the sun is hitting him, I don't think he's going to be waking up any time soon. Now, John, you're wondering where the Birmingham boys get their names from. Well, their name comes from an area north of us. So in the Timbavati Game Reserve, there's a section of that game reserve called Birmingham. And it's much like here in the Sabi Sands. Even though we have lodge names like in Koro and Djuma, the actual farm names are different. So this area, and the farm name for this area is Gowrie. And then we've got farms called Sparta, Ravenscourt, Scott, so there's a whole bunch of different farm names, and that's the same for the Timbavati. And so the farm name was called Birmingham, and this pride that these boys come from was called the Birmingham Pride because of where they spent time. And so that's why they got their name. It's got nothing else to do with just the area that they spend time in, really. So it's just an affection name from there. And you can see he is really not going to be spending too much more time active. There's a big sigh as the vehicle started. So I think what we're going to do is probably leave him and carry on and try and see if we can't go find those sticks and cubs, or see if those mating pair of leopards did indeed cross north, because I think our male lion is going to be very, very sleepy, and we don't have the best view of him at this stage. And so what we'll probably do is come back this evening for our sunset safari around sunset and see if we can't get a bit more activity. And now while we carry on, let's go back to Jamie, who I think is still driving around and still listening out for her male leopard.